Now, this probably isn't a great way to start off, but I have a stack of stories. I got files full of them, and I decided I was going to share a couple of them with you that have nothing to do with my talk whatsoever. Oh, the flamingos. So the flamingos today had little green top hats for St. Patrick's Day and green bows tied around their necks. So I'm glad you reminded me. There once was a man who had worked all his life and had saved all his money and was a real miser. He loved money more than just about anything. And one day he said to his wife, "When I die, I want you to take all my money and put it in the casket with me because I want to take it with me into the next life." He forced her to promise with all her heart that she'd obey his wish and put all their money in the casket with him. Well, it wasn't long before he died. His wife sat in the church during the funeral next to her best friend. When the ceremony was finished, just before the undertakers got ready to close the casket, the widow said, "Wait just a minute." And she placed a small box that she had with her in her husband's lifeless hands. The undertakers then locked the casket and rolled it away. The woman's friend said, "I know you weren't fool enough to put all your money in there with your husband." The widow replied, "Listen, I'm a Christian. I can't go back on my word. I promised that I was going to put that money in the casket with him, and that's exactly what I did." "You mean to tell me you put all your money in that casket?" "I sure did." "How did you fit it in that little box?" she asked. "I wrote him a check for the full amount." Well, we are talking about guidance today. And modern guidance systems for airplanes are incredibly accurate and reliable today. Now, when aviation first began, pilots would follow railroad tracks to their destination, and that was how they could know where they were going. But as time has evolved and systems have gotten so much more sophisticated now, for a commercial airplane, they know they can fly through storms and the night and any kind of circumstances and arrive at the right place at the right time. Their guidance systems are phenomenal. But what about individuals? What about you and I and our guidance system? The truth is that as spiritual beings, as well as human beings, we have a tremendous guidance system that we've had really since the beginning of time. Now, traditional Christianity sometimes seems to promote the idea that we are inherently sinful, and therefore the guidance that comes from within us is inherently unreliable. Seems to be a prevailing notion that God is on the outside and the devil is on the inside. Now, this premise has led to the conclusion that one needs to look to Scripture for their guidance, to the Ten Commandments. Now, I'm not against the Ten Commandments. I think they're marvelous. But there comes a time when we must go further and look beyond the book and turn to Spirit, turn to that inner knowing, turn to our intuition. The guidance in books, even scriptural books, is a bit like following the railroad tracks. In Unity, we embrace the idea that we are inherently and essentially good, that we are created in the image and likeness of God. We are one with God, and therefore the unfailing guidance of Spirit is ever available to us. And God's will for us is good and only good. Now, it isn't always easy, though, to perceive that to perceive that guidance, because as human beings, we have a mind and an ego that is very often distracted and caught up in a lot of limited beliefs and sometimes erroneous thinking. In other words, we have to get out of our own way in order to experience the guidance, the intuition that is available to us. Oftentimes, we have a decision to make, and our inclination is to acquire more information. This is our intellect striving to gather information from outside of us. So we may ask our friends for, what would you do under these circumstances? Or we might ask our family, what is your opinion of what I should do? And of course, we'll get all kinds of differing responses. Now, that's not to say that this inquiry outside of us isn't often useful, but ultimately, the answer has to come from within. And if we get ourselves too focused on this outside information, oftentimes what it can do is just really kind of crank up our level of anxiety about making the decision. And then that unsettled nature of our mental and emotional state can cloud the guidance that is available to us. Supposedly, there is a post office somewhere in the United States that is located precisely on the Continental Divide. And if a raindrop falls on one side of the roof, it goes into the Pacific Ocean. And if it falls on the other side of the roof, just maybe a foot away, it'll end up in the Gulf of Mexico. Now, it seems to me that sometimes we fall into the trap of looking at our decisions like this, like they seem so big, so overwhelming that we have difficulty moving forward on them. If we make the wrong decision, then this could really be a disaster. So it does seem to me that there are, on occasion, maybe decisions that would metaphorically put us in one ocean or the other. But for the most part, it seems to me that the way this process works is not that we make a decision that determines all of our future. We make decisions a step at a time as we are guided. It's very much a process. And while the process of taking that next step maybe has a great deal to do with our highest and best on the physical material plane of things, it's really very much, and maybe more importantly, about the process of learning to listen and pay attention and learn about that indwelling presence and the guidance that it has for us. Because I believe that if we do our best to make a decision, to look to Spirit, ask for guidance, affirm guidance, and make the best decision we can, then that loving Creator will always be providing us another opportunity to make a new decision, even if the one that we made maybe wasn't as good as it could have been. There's a story about a youngster who lived on a farm back in the old days when there was no electric lighting. And as he got older, he got some responsibilities. And one of them was for him, before everybody went to bed, to go out to the barn and check on the animals and make sure that they were okay and come back in. And he had a little kerosene lantern that he could take with him. And as fall came on, the days got shorter, it got darker until about the time he was supposed to do this, it was pitch dark. He couldn't even see the barn anymore. And he got kind of scared about this. And he talked to his father about his concerns. And his father said, well, now as you know, there's a stone path that leads from the house to the barn. And with your lantern, you can see the next step, can't you? And he said, yes, I can. And he said, when you take that step, you can see the next step, can't you? And he said, yes, I can. And he said, that's all you need to know is how to take the next step and just have faith that it's going to take you to the barn because you know that's where it leads. And I think really for us, that's really the way that it works. All we really need to know is what is the next step. Because oftentimes the destination isn't revealed to us, but the next step is, and we can have the faith that it's really leading us towards the highest and the best. The next step is all we really need to know. Now, I'm not the speediest decision maker. Sometimes I am a reluctant decider. Jeanette is smiling over here, I can tell. Have any of you ever taken the Myers-Briggs personality inventory thing? It used to be quite a thing. I don't know if anybody does it anymore, but I found it to be. Well, I took it years ago, and I found it to be really helpful in getting some insight as to my own way of operating. And one of the things because what it does is it reveals significant tendencies in our own personal way of thinking and doing things. And one of mine is that I have a tendency to like to keep my options open. Some people like things settled, they like things to cut and dried, and they like things tied up, and not me. I didn't even get married till I was 42 years old. And so to make a decision tends to me to eliminate options that would be possible otherwise. So I have this tendency to put off decisions, and sometimes I can get into this mode where I balance the alternatives, and if one side's I'm leaning this way, well, it's pretty easy to put something on the other side and bring them back into what you might call an equilibrium. It's easy for me to say. Equilibrium of indecision. That's what I'm. Well, over the years, I've learned to do better, to listen more carefully to my guidance. And I've realized that sometimes not making a decision is making a decision. So that really cool thing that was on Amazon or at Costco is gone if you wait long enough to make a decision. And sometimes that meaningful opportunity in life is out of reach as well. And I used to be a little worried about God's will for me. I thought, well, what if God's will for me is to live in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan or in Nova Scotia or someplace like that? But the truth is that we can trust in God's will for us, that it is truly the highest and the best. And of course, that really has to do with our consciousness, our growth in consciousness, and what brings us joy and peace. So when Jeanette texted me and asked me if I'd like to speak here today, I paused, as I have a tendency to do, and I looked at my calendar, and I checked it out inside. Did I want to do the work and take the time to come on over? I mean, I love coming over here, but life has been a little busy lately. But this time the answer came pretty quickly. I think it was pretty quick. That's my recollection anyway. Sometimes I keep Jeanette hanging for a little while. And this time, actually, I gave her a title right on the spot because what I had felt was that I had a couple of things happen that really were guidance for me, that this is where I wanted to be. And so I told her, I Am Guided would be the title of my talk for today. I believe that the truth is that we are consistently, constantly, and unerringly guided by an inner guidance system. And there are really two powerful processes that I would like to discuss here this morning that are great at helping us to get ourselves out of the way so that this intuition, this awareness of the greater good that is ever leading us can express in our lives. And the first is affirmation. Everything's blooming over here. I noticed that the pears and what are those, red buds or something? Things are starting to bud over in Prescott, but you guys are way further along. Affirmation is a powerful tool. It's a powerful tool for reorienting our thinking in a more constructive way. Now, Charles Fillmore endorsed a two-part process that was really, he called it denial and affirmation. We might call it release and affirmation. I'm going to talk first about the idea of just affirmation. And I believe that it's a powerful way of, and this particular affirmation, I think, is a powerful one for getting us past some of our kind of mixed up thinking that might be going on and putting us on the right track. And it goes like this. God is my unfailing guide. I am guided, I am guided, I am guided. God is my unfailing guide. I am guided. I am guided. I am guided. And in case of emergency, just shorten it to "I am guided." But I like to say it 3 times. And in the spirit of Charles Fillmore, if we wanted to include a denial, what he was saying, a denial meant the denial of the power of that concept, that idea. And but we could call it a release, and maybe we would use something like, "I release all concern. God is my unfailing guide. I am guided. I am guided. I am guided." Now, I handed out those little pieces of paper. I always bring you guys some kind of piece of paper that can be recycled or whatever. But these I thought you could stick to your refrigerator if you chose to. I'm going to invite you to join with me now, if you care to, in affirming this together. God is my unfailing guide. I am guided. I am guided. I am guided. One more time. God is my unfailing guide. I am guided. I am guided. I am guided. I believe this is a powerful affirmation, and I encourage you to use it if the situation calls for it. Now, I have another favorite information that I'm throwing in here at no extra cost, and that has to do with when you have seemingly misplaced or seemingly lost some item, and you're looking for it. And what really needs to happen is that we need to allow ourselves to become quieter, because we do know on some level where those keys are. But we may have put them somewhere unconsciously, but on some level we notice where we put them, or maybe there was some well-meaning person who moved them around on us and put it in some other place. But even then, Spirit ultimately knows. So my favorite affirmation under these circumstances, after I first asked my wife if she knows where my keys are, is nothing is lost in consciousness. Nothing is lost in consciousness. Let's affirm that together. Nothing is lost in consciousness. I can affirm that and allow myself, because sometimes I'm frantically looking around the house here. I can affirm that and just allow myself to calm down. And it's incredible, amazing the way things have a tendency to show up. Now, prayer is, of course, a central component for unity. And it's also, I believe, very important in us getting in touch with our guidance. Now, in unity, we teach affirmative prayer. In other words, we're not begging God to do something that God would not otherwise do, because God's will for us is always the highest and the best. Affirmative prayer, on the other hand, declares the truth about us and about the situation, and enables us to tune in to the higher vibration of Spirit. So an affirmative prayer might be something like this: "Beloved Spirit, I know that your will for me is good and only good. I open the way in my heart and mind for your unfolding blessing, and I give thanks for a great outcome." Now, what that can do is this, if we had a gauge here that was really measuring our vibration level, and we say that down here, it's kind of where it caught up in fear and anxiety, and then we move up into maybe a more positive state of greater peace and acceptance, and maybe we move up into joy and love ultimately. Well, we have something to say about where we are on that scale of things, and entering into an affirmative prayer consciousness can raise that level, so that whereas right here, if our guidance is up here from Spirit and we're down here, it's going to be pretty tough for us to pick it up. But if we allow ourselves to raise that vibration and bring ourselves into a place where we're more in attunement, then it can really be there for us. I think after we've prayed our prayer, it's a good idea to, one other thing I guess I should mention is this. I believe that affirmative prayer is really the most powerful prayer process that I'm familiar with. But if you find yourself in a situation where you just feel like you need to get down on your knees and ask God for what you need, if that's the way you're guided, I'd say go for it. I've done it on more than one occasion. But I do think that once we have prayed our prayer, it's a good idea to let it go and trust that it's in God's hands and relax the analysis and allow the guidance to come through. Now, sometimes that experience of our guidance coming to us may be a process that Hugh Prather, I don't know how many of you would be familiar with him, but he was kind of an old-time New Thought and Course in Miracles guy. What he said was that he looked for what he called his peaceful preference. So when he got himself to the place where he was at least as peaceful as he could be under those circumstances, that peaceful preference was generally in the direction of his highest good. For me, often guidance comes as a feeling that something is just right for me, that it's not so much up here as it is here. And then I think sometimes it shows up as a kind of a coincidence, something that feels like a sign. You know, the old thing of the book falling off the shelf, or, you know, that piece of paper that had that information on it. Was kind of what happened in this case. I had a couple of things happen that were like, oh, okay, well, it's pretty clear I'm supposed to be over here today. So there's probably an infinite number of ways that guidance can show up. But it seems to me that it's generally something that's kind of subtle, because the universe isn't pounding us over the head with our guidance. It's something that's coming on a quiet level, and it's up to us to get quiet enough so that we can access it. One time, Pam and I were over in Hawaii on a trip that just kind of, it just fell into our laps. It was hard to explain how it all came together without our trying. But it was an amazing trip. We were on Maui, and we were staying on I think it's called the Kanapali Beach. And there's a big rock there that everybody climbs up on this rock and they jump off into the water. And so there's a lot of screaming and laughing and people carrying on and splashing going on. And people are having a great time. But I was snorkeling off the beach. And I would go into water and I could hear all of that, because the water, you know, is such a great conductor of sound. I could hear all of that going on. It was quite loud, actually. But I noticed that there was something else that I could hear. And it took me a while to identify it. And when I finally did, I realized that it was whales. I guess they're singing, if you want to call it that, but they're communicating on some level. But it was wintertime. They were in the neighborhood. And while I was underwater, if I just listened past all the noise, I could hear this whale song, and it was quite inspiring. Now, the people who were jumping off the rock and having a great time, I mean, that's all well and good. And I bless them. I think that's great. But I doubt if many of them heard the whales that day. And maybe it wouldn't have really mattered to them anyway. I don't know. But for me, it was a really meaningful experience. But it was because I was quiet enough and I was listening to the degree that I could hear it. I do believe that we have a remarkable guidance system that's built into us. Our work is to listen and learn how to recognize it and to follow it to the best of our ability, or as follow it as we choose. We have the freedom to choose. There is that question of do we really want to do God's will, or is it my will that I'm more interested in? Now, to tell you the truth, I think they are, on a basic level, they are the same. But in the meantime, my idea of what I want may seem to be kind of in conflict. We always have the choice. We are free to choose. And God, I believe that the presence of Spirit is continuously and constantly offering us the opportunity to choose again, whatever choice we might make. So let's take this into prayer for a moment. Spirit, I am open and receptive to your presence, your life, your spirit, your guidance. I know that I am guided. And if at this particular moment it's difficult for me to discern, well, it doesn't mean that it isn't there. I just allow myself to move into a place of greater trust. Allow myself to become a little more quiet. I am open and receptive to the guidance of Spirit. And I affirm that on a deep and profound level, that awareness of what is really for the highest and best for me and for everyone is ever available. I am guided. I am guided. I am guided. Spirit, I am grateful for the knowledge that you are here for me now and always. I am never alone and I need not be afraid. That you go before me, making safe and successful my way. And so it is with a sense of renewed confidence that I say, thank you, God. And so it is. Amen.